The quiet morning habit doctors endorsed before modern heating and sealed homes was, well, something most folks just did. Back in the 1940s, long before HVAC systems, air purifiers, and insulated wall cavities became standard, doctors quietly approved a simple morning practice that most families followed without even calling it a health method. It wasn't some wellness trend or old folk superstition. It was just a routine built into daily life because homes were closed tight overnight, coal and wood fires burned for hours, and honestly, indoor air quality was a real concern. The practice was straightforward. Open the house to outside air for about 10 minutes each morning, regardless of season. Doctors didn't advertise it, manufacturers didn't monetize it, but public health pamphlets, nursing manuals, and household guides of the era kept on reinforcing it as basic hygiene. What matters here isn't nostalgia, but what this habit actually did and why it was quietly tolerated and often encouraged by medical professionals of the time. The rule wasn't about some symbolic airing out or leaving a door cracked all day. It was deliberate, short, and controlled. Windows were opened on opposite sides of the home, or at least in 2 rooms, to create a brief cross-ventilation. The duration was intentionally limited. 10 minutes was enough to exchange stale indoor air without chilling the structure, bedding, or walls. This mattered because homes relied on retained heat from masonry stoves, radiators, or banked fires. The goal was not comfort, but air exchange. Overnight, carbon dioxide from breathing accumulated, moisture from cooking and sleeping condensed, and combustion byproducts lingered. Doctors of the era understood that stale air aggravated respiratory conditions, especially in winter when windows stayed shut for weeks at a time. You won't find this rule branded or trademarked, but it appears consistently in mid-century nursing manuals, tuberculosis prevention guides, and military medical housing standards. Physicians emphasized fresh air as a stabilizing factor rather than a cure. They believed that brief exposure to outdoor air reduced morning headaches, lowered respiratory irritation, and improved alertness without stressing the body. Importantly, they warned against prolonged drafts or sleeping in cold air, which is where later generations misinterpreted the advice. The 10-minute window was a compromise between sanitation and thermal stability. Doctors didn't need controlled trials to see the effect. Hospital wards, barracks, and sanatoriums used timed ventilation cycles daily, even in cold climates. In practice, this happened immediately after waking. One person opened the windows while the fire was stirred, or the stove dampers adjusted. Bedding was pulled back to release trapped moisture, not shaken outside. Doors between rooms were opened to allow airflow. After roughly 10 minutes, windows were closed, beds were made, and heat recovered naturally. The house never lost its stored warmth because the walls, floors, and furniture held heat far longer than the air itself. This routine reduced condensation on windows, slowed mold growth in corners and closets, and kept fabric, mattresses, and woodwork drier over time. It was especially common in winter because summer airflow happened naturally throughout the day. The 1940s were defined by wartime crowding, fuel rationing, and widespread respiratory illness. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, and chronic bronchitis were persistent threats. Doctors had limited pharmaceutical tools, so environmental control mattered. Morning ventilation reduced airborne irritants and moisture that allowed bacteria to persist indoors. During fuel shortages, homes were intentionally sealed overnight to conserve heat, which made morning air exchange even more critical. Military housing standards required daily ventilation for enlisted quarters, and similar principles filtered into civilian life through public health messaging. This wasn't about comfort, it was about keeping people functional in difficult conditions. For survivalists and preparedness-minded viewers, the relevance is immediate. In any long-term grid-down scenario, sealed shelters accumulate moisture, odors, and combustion gases fast. Whether you're heating with propane, wood, or improvised fuel, indoor air quality becomes a limiting factor. The 10-minute morning air rule provides a low-risk way to reset indoor air without sacrificing thermal efficiency. Applied today, it means briefly venting shelters, cabins, or even vehicles used for overnight sleeping. It also reduces long-term damage to gear, bedding, and stored materials caused by damp air. The key is timing and restraint, not constant ventilation. In a modern home, this can be done before heating cycles ramp up. So, open 2 windows, preferably on opposite sides for a short measured period. In an off-grid cabin, you want to do this after rekindling the stove, but before the structure fully warms. And if you're in a vehicle-based shelter, doors can be opened briefly while you're stationary. The principle stays the same. Exchange air, not heat mass. Over time, this reduces condensation, improves sleep quality, and lowers the likelihood of respiratory irritation. These are small advantages that honestly compound during long winters or extended emergencies. Central heating, insulation, and sealed construction made folks forget the difference between warm air and healthy air. Mechanical systems replaced habits. But when those systems fail, the knowledge gap becomes, well, obvious. The 10-minute morning air rule survived wars, fuel shortages, and epidemics because it was simple and reliable. It didn't depend on technology or perfect conditions. That's why it deserves attention now, not as a trend, but as recovered institutional memory. If this kind of overlooked practical history matters to you, this channel exists for that exact reason. Go ahead and subscribe to Warfield Prepper Chronicles for more documented, usable knowledge pulled from the past, and share this episode with someone who understands that survival isn't about gear alone, but about habits that quietly kept folks alive when systems failed.